Empire v. The Prince of Hamlet. Excerpt by Victor Pelevin. Mind B. There was not a stick of furniture in Enlil Maratovich's Hamlet, except for a stepladder. The setting was extremely ascetic, cushions of an indeterminate gray color on the floor, and a circular fresco in similarly depressing muted tones, depicting the funeral of an unknown knight accompanied on his final journey by a multitude of worthy gentlemen in lace collars, the deceased himself encased in a suit of black armor with a cleft breastplate, above which hovered a brilliant blue mosquito as big as a well-fed crow. At approximately the height of my shoulders was a white copper hoop attached to the ceiling by 3 rods. It took up almost all of the room. My first impression of this metal ring was that it was a very, very old object. Enlil Maratovich was hanging head downwards, his legs hooked over the hoop and his arms crossed over his breast. He had on a tracksuit of thick black jersey. The black hood hung down and looked absurdly like the sort of fantastic stand-up collar ruff of Mosfilm costume department might pick out for a vampire. "You look like one of the mobile vampires," said Hera. "What?" said Enlil Maratovich in some surprise. "There was an advertisement on television a little while ago about vampires who only use their mobiles at night so as to economize on the daytime tariff. During the day they sleep with their heads pointed down, like bats." Enlil Maratovich gave a snort of derision. "As far as I know," he said, "vampires don't need to economize on tariffs. Vampires economize on advertising." "Allow me to disagree with you, Enlil Maratovich," said Hera. "I think, that is to say, I am sure, that a PR campaign has been running now for some years aimed at rehabilitating the image of vampires. Those mobile vampires I mentioned are just one example. Any fool could see that it was really advertising vampires, not mobile phone tariffs, to say nothing of the treatment vampires get from Hollywood." I could see exactly what she meant, and she was right. All sorts of instances came to my mind to confirm what she had said. For some unknown reason, people seem anxious to idealize us vampires. We are portrayed as exquisite connoisseurs, melancholy romantics, pensive dreamers, but always with a marked undercurrent of sympathy. Vampire roles are taken by good-looking actors. Pop stars are happy to appear as vampires in their music videos. Celebrities in the West and in the East see nothing shameful in appearing as vampires. It is most odd. Sexual abusers of minors and gravestone vandals are much closer to the man in the street than we are, but in the world of human culture, generally you will not find a shred of sympathy for them, while vampires are drenched by a positive outpouring of understanding and love. Only now did I see what it all meant. It was incredible that I had not worked it out for myself. "Yes, that is indeed how things are," said Enlil Maratovich. "Vampires all over the world regularly chip in to support yet another vampire movie, the idea being to put people off the scent of who is actually drinking their red liquid or how it is done. But of course, this cannot go on forever. The day will come when the symphony of man and vampire can no longer be kept secret, and against that day we need to groom public opinion." I decided the moment was right for me to put the question that had been bothering me. "Tell me, please, Enlil Maratovich, our flight here, Was that the Great Fall? No. It was not the answer I had been expecting. Enlil Maratovich smiled. The Great Fall is when you learn what I am about to explain to you today. For this reason, it would be desirable for your heads to be functioning at their best, so I suggest you get yourselves into position. He indicated the hoop. The copper ring had a soft padded cover of clear plastic, similar to a chin-up bar in a gym. I waited until Hera had got off the ladder. I had wanted to give her a hand, but she managed it very adroitly on her own, then climbed up and hung on the ring myself with my head downwards. The blood rushed to my head, but I found the sensation pleasant and calming. Hera was hanging directly opposite me, her eyes closed, the yellow light from the lamp falling on her. Her t-shirt hung down, exposing her belly button. "Like it?" inquired Enlil Maratovich, addressing me. "Like what?" "Hanging like this." "Yes," I said, "more than I thought I would. Is it because of the flow of red liquid into the tongue?" "Exactly. Whenever a vampire needs to gather his strength quickly and concentrate his energy, it is the best method." He was right. With each passing second, I felt better. The energy I had expanded during the flight was restored. Hanging upside down was as comfortable as sitting in an easy chair near the fire. "You are going to learn a secret today," said Enlil Maratovich. "But I imagine you have quite a few questions stored up. Perhaps it would be a good idea to start with them?" "Well, could you tell us what our flight was?" I asked. "It was a flight." "I mean, was it all a dream? A special kind of trance? Or did it all happen for real? What would an onlooker have seen?" "The most important condition of that journey," replied Enlil Maratovich, "is that there should be no onlooker." "That's just what I don't understand," I said. "We were flying past houses all the time. In fact, I very nearly crashed into one. But Mithra told me that we could not be seen by anyone. How can that be?" "You've heard of stealth technology? This is something similar, except that vampires absorb attention rather than radio waves." "So would we have been visible to radar while we were in the air?" "To whose radar?" "Well, generally. The question has no meaning. Even if you had been visible to radar, the radar screen would not have been visible to anyone at the time." "I wonder if we could change the subject," said Hera. "Agreed," replied Enlil Maratovich. "I've had an idea," continued Hera. "I think I know where the tongue lived before it took up residence in people." "Where?" "In that huge bat which, until a few minutes ago, I was." Enlil Maratovich grunted approvingly. "Our name for her is Mighty Bat. That is how we usually refer to her in English. Be careful, though, not to call her Mighty Mouse when you talk to our American friends. They tend to take offense, and it's not much help to explain that in Russian the same word does duty for both animals. That's their culture. Nothing you can do about it." "Was my guess right?" asked Hera. "Yes and no." "What does that mean?" "You cannot actually say that the tongue lived in the mighty bat. A very long time ago, many millions of years, it was the bat. At that time, dinosaurs roamed the earth, and their red liquid was the mighty bat's food. That is the origin of the phrase, the cry of the mighty bat. Think for a moment how amazing it is. When you bite a person today, you are giving him or her the very same command that eons ago had the power to deprive a huge mountain of flesh of the will to resist. I simply cannot get my head around this incredible fact. It makes me want to fall to my knees and pray. I wanted to ask to which deity Enlil Maratovich would offer up his prayers, but could not quite bring myself to. Instead, I asked him, "Are there any fossil records of these enormous bats in the rocks? Have their skeletons survived?" "No." "Why not?" "They were too intelligent. They cremated their dead, as humans do nowadays. Another reason is that there were not very many of them, because they were at the top of the food pyramid." "When did they reach this position?" I asked. "Vampires were always at the apex of the food pyramid. They were the first intelligent civilization on Earth. It was not a civilization that constructed a material culture, buildings, industry, and so on. But that does not mean they were undeveloped. Quite the reverse. From today's standpoint, they may be termed ecologically advanced." "What happened to their civilization?" "It was destroyed by a global catastrophe 65 million years ago, when our planet was struck by the asteroid that resulted in the Gulf of Mexico. The land was swamped by giant tsunamis that washed away all living creatures. But the mighty bat managed to survive by taking to the air. You can still hear an echo of those days in the Bible. Quote, "And the earth was without form and void, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." End quote. "Fabulous," I said, for no other reason than to say something. Dust blackened the sky. It was cold and dark. In the space of just a few years, almost the entire food chain perished. Dinosaurs became extinct. Dependent on their red liquid for sustenance, the mighty bat was also threatened by extinction. But vampires succeeded in extracting from themselves their own essence in the form that today we call the tongue. You can think of it as something like the self's external memory card, the core of the brain, a kind of worm, 90% of which consists of nerve cells. This receptacle for individual selfhood lodged in the crania of other creatures better adapted to the new conditions of life, and entered into a symbiotic relationship with them. I probably don't need to go into the details. "We already know that," I muttered. "What sort of creatures did they dwell in?" "For a long period, we lived in large predators, such as the saber-toothed tiger and other big cats. Our culture was at the time, somewhat alarming. Heroic and violent, you might say. We were terrible, magnificent and cruel. But you cannot be magnificent and cruel forever. And approximately 500,000 years ago, there was a kind of revolution in the world of vampires." The term revolution had frequently cropped up in discourse and could apparently mean almost anything you wanted to. I thought of the most recent contexts in which I could remember it being used. "Do you mean something like the Orange Revolution in Kiev, or something more like the Volvo Revolution?" Said Enlil Maratovich uncertainly. "Not quite. It was more akin to religious conversion. As I mentioned, vampires set themselves the task of changing over from stock raising to a form of dairy husbandry. They decided to create a milch animal for their needs. The result was the appearance of mankind." "How did they do this?" in the same way as humans bred dogs or sheep? By artificial selection? Yes, but not before a whole succession of genetic modifications had been carried out. And it was not the first such experiment. The mighty bat had already been responsible for the appearance of warm-blooded creatures, which were designed as vehicles for raising the temperature of red liquid to an optimum level. But the development of the human being represented a category leap to a new species. What species was the human being bred from? Inquired Hera. From primates? Yes. Where and when? It took quite a long time. The final genetic modification occurred 1800,000 years ago in Africa. That is where modern man came from. How was this artificial selection achieved? Asked Hera. I mean, when cattle are bred, the cows selected to breed from are those that produce a lot of milk. But what was the decisive criterion in this case? Vampires bred a creature with a special kind of mind. What different kinds of mind are there? Well, said Enlil Maratovich, the story begins a long way back. He yawned and closed his eyes. A full minute of silence ensued. Apparently, Enlil Maratovich had decided to begin his account not merely from a long way back, but from so far that at first nothing was visible at all. I thought he must have gone to sleep, and looked over inquiringly at Hera. Hera shrugged her shoulders. Suddenly, Enlil Maratovich opened his eyes and began to speak. There is an old idea, often advanced in books of fantasy and the occult, that people merely imagine they move about on the surface of the globe and look out into illimitable space. In reality, they live inside a hollow sphere, and the cosmos, which they believe they are observing, is no more than an optical illusion. I know, I said. It's an esoteric cosmogony of the Nazis. They even proposed building a rocket which would fly vertically upwards through the ice zone at the center of the planet and annihilate America. My erudition produced no effect at all on Enlil Maratovich. In fact, he continued, it is a metaphor of great antiquity, which was known in the days of Atlantis. It embodied an insight which people in those times had no way of expressing other than metaphorically. We exist surrounded not by objects, but by sensations generated by our sense organs. All that we perceive as stars or fences or burdock plants is nothing but an arrangement of images produced by nervous stimuli. We are hermetically sealed inside our bodies, and what appears real to us is in fact our interpretation of electrical signals received by the brain. The simplest, though not quite correct, model of the mind, which we will employ for the sake of brevity, is known as the Cartesian theater. According to this model, our sensory organs provide us with photographs of the external world, while we ourselves sit inside the hollow sphere, the walls of which are covered with these photographs. This enclosed spherical void is our world, from which we cannot escape, however much we might wish to. Together, the photographs constitute a picture of the world which, as it seems to us, exists outside us. Do you follow? Yes, I said. The original mind acts like a mirror inside the sphere. It reflects the world and takes decisions accordingly. If the reflection is dark, it is time to sleep. If light, it is time to search for food. If the reflection is hot, time to move aside until it gets cooler, and vice versa. All actions are determined by reflexes and instincts. We call this type of mind A. It functions solely as a reflection of the world. Understand? Of course. Now try to imagine a living creature which has two minds. As well as mind A, it has a mind B, which has no connection at all with the photographs on the walls inside the sphere, but produces its own visions from inside itself. From its depths there arises an aura of abstract concepts, a sort of northern lights. Can you imagine that? Yes. Now we are getting to the crucially important part. Imagine that mind B is itself one of the objects perceived by mind A, and the visions produced by mind B are perceived by mind A as equivalent to the photographs of the external world it is accustomed to reflecting. What mind B has produced in its inmost hidden depths appears to mind A as part of the outside world. I don't follow that, I said. That's only how it seems to you. In fact, you both encounter the phenomenon many times a day. Can you give us an example? Asked Hera. I can. Imagine that let's say you're standing in the new Arbat in Moscow, looking at two motor cars parked by the casino. To look at, they are both long and black, and almost identical. Alright, one might be a touch sleeker and longer. With me so far? Yes, agreed Hera. When you notice differences in the shape of the boot and the headlights, the different sounds made by the engines and the design of the tires, that is your mind A at work. But when what you see is two Mercs, one of which is glamorous, year-old, top-of-the-range model, and the other a shitty pile of junk, the model Berezovsky would have used to meet General Lebet at the bathhouse 5,000 years ago, which nowadays you can pick up for 10 grand, that's mind B at work, an aspect of the northern lights it produces. But because it manifests itself as two black cars standing side by side, you assume that the product of mind B is something that really exists in the outside world. You explain it very clearly, I said. But it still does really exist in the outside world, doesn't it? No, that can be easily proved. You can measure any mind A type difference between our two cars with a simple tape measure. It won't change in 100 years. But the differences mind B ascribes to the cars are not susceptible to any objective assessment or measurement, and no one in 100 years' time will be able to tell you for certain what they were. So how does it come about that different people seeing these two cars will come to the same conclusion about them? Asked Hera. I mean, that one of them is a glamorous must-have and the other a crap heap. The reason is that these two people both have a mind B attuned to the same wavelength. This causes them to see an identical hallucination. Who creates the hallucination? I asked. Mind B does, or to be precise, a vast number of such minds all interacting with one another. This is what distinguishes people from animals. Apes and human beings both have mind A. Only human beings have mind B. It is the result of that selection engineered by the vampires of old. Why does a creature bred for milking need mind be? I should have thought by now that would be clear to you, isn't it? No, I said. Enlil Maratovich shot an inquiring glance at Hera. Nor to me, she said. In fact, I'm even more confused. The reason is the same for both of you. You are still thinking like humans. Hearing this rebuke once again, I reacted automatically, drawing my head deeper into my shoulders. Please teach us to think in a new way, Hera muttered. Enlil Maratovich laughed. My dear girl, he said, 5,000 marketing specialists have been defecating inside your head for 10 years, and you expect me to clean it all out in 5 minutes? Don't be offended though, I'm not blaming you. I was just like you myself. Don't you think I don't know what you both think about at night? I know exactly. You're puzzled as to where or how vampires get hold of human red liquid. You think it might come from donor centers, or tortured infants, or underground laboratories, or some other such nonsense. Am I right? Approximately, I agreed. If I wasn't, you would be the only exception I've come across in 40 years, said Enlil Maratovich. And if you'd like to know, this universal blindness is the most mystifying thing I have ever encountered in my life. When you come to understand the truth of it, you will think so too. What is this truth that we have to understand? Asked Hera. Let's look at it logically, step by step. If the human being is a milk-producing animal, his principal business must be the production of food for vampires. So far, so good? True. Now tell me, what is the main activity of human beings? Giving birth to children and raising them? Suggested Hera. An increasingly rare event in the civilized world. In any case, it is certainly not mankind's main preoccupation. What is more important than anything else to a human being? Money? I hazarded. At last! And what, exactly, is money? As if you didn't know, I shrugged. Hanging upside down made this a rather peculiar maneuver. Perhaps I do know, but do you? Somewhere or other, I believe there are 7 scientific definitions, I said. I know what you are referring to, but your definitions all suffer from one fundamental flaw. They were all formulated with the same objective: to earn money trying to sell these definitions. That is like using a ruler to measure the length of itself. You mean all the definitions are incorrect? Not so much incorrect as that when you analyze them in detail, they all say the same thing. Money is money, which is equivalent to saying nothing at all. But at the same time, Enlil Maratovich raised his finger, that is to say, pointed it toward the floor. At the same time, people do have an inkling of the truth, but only subconsciously. Can you remember what the representatives of the toiling classes call their masters? Exploiters? Bloodsuckers, said Hera. I expected Enlil Maratovich to snub her, but on the contrary, he clapped his hands in approbation. Yes, that's my clever girl. Exactly that. drinkers of red liquid, even though it would never occur to any of them to do so literally. Now do you see? You mean to say, began Hera, but Enlil Maratovich did not let her finish. Yes, just so. Vampires have long ceased to avail themselves of biological red liquid in favor of a far more advanced medium of human vital energy. Money. Are you serious? I asked. Never more so. Think for yourself. What does human civilization consist of? It's nothing more than a gigantic production of money. The cities people build are pure money factories, and that is the reason people crowd into them in such excessive numbers. But much more than money is produced there, I protested. In cities, there is something called the economy, which is supposed to grow constantly. Enlil Maratovich broke in. Although it is never completely clear just what is growing or to what purpose. Because when you start to analyze it, you see that it largely consists of bankers, stockbrokers, lawyers, and other speculators orally pleasuring each other all day. People have no idea what it is that keeps on growing, yet they spend all their time worrying whether the rate of growth is faster or slower than they suppose it should be. And then all of a sudden, they find everything has gone pear-shaped, and the period of national mourning is decreed for the whole country. But then it starts to grow again, and all the while, nobody, especially those who actually live in the city, ever glimpses this mysterious growing object with which they are so concerned. He extended his hand in front of him as if to show the panorama of the invisible city beyond the walls. What people are actually doing is producing something the nature of which they completely fail to understand, he continued, despite spending all day, every day, thinking about it to the exclusion of everything else. Don't imagine it gives me any pleasure to say it, but the workspace for today's office proletarian, his cubicle, even looks like a stall for a large cattle stock. The only difference is that in front of his face, instead of a feeding trough, he has a monitor displaying his fodder digitally. And what does he produce in his pen? The answer is so obvious that it has even entered into the idiom of most languages. The worker is making money. I wanted to register another objection. Money is not a product which is being made, I said. It is merely one of those inventions which have made life simpler, one of the evolutionary legacies by which mankind has risen above the animals. Enlil Maratovich turned to me with an amused smile on his face. Do you really believe man rose above the animals as a result of evolution? Of course, I replied. Surely that is so. No, he said. He placed himself lower down, far lower. Nowadays, the only person who can afford the lifestyle of an animal is a retired millionaire. To live in the bosom of nature in ideal climatic conditions, to move freely, to consume only ecologically pure food, and, above all, to be entirely free from worry about anything. Just think about it. No animal works. What about squirrels? Asked Hera. They gather nuts, don't they? My dear, that's not work. If squirrels spent all their time from morning till night frenzied trying to flog each other, rotting bear shit, that would be work. Gathering nuts is just free retail therapy. The only animals who work are beasts of burden, whom man have bred in their own image and likeness, plus, of course, man himself. If, as you say, the purpose of money is to make life easier, why is it that people strive all their lives vainly trying to earn it, only to collapse at the end into a senile heap of debris? Can you seriously imagine that people do all that for their own convenience? Oh, please. Man does not even know what money truly is. He swept Hera and me with his gaze. But the truth is, he went on, it's not at all a difficult or complex problem to understand what money truly is. All you have to do is pose the elementary question: where does it come from? The question seemed to be directed at me. It's not easy to explain in a couple of words, I said. Economists still argue about it after all these years. Let them go on arguing forever if necessary, but it makes no difference to the poor moneymaker. His time and his strength is where money comes from. His vital energy, drawn from the air, from the light of the sun, from nourishment and other life-giving experiences, are all transmuted into it. You mean metaphorically? I mean literally. Man thinks he is generating money for himself. In fact, he generates it from himself. Life is so arranged that the only way he is able to get hold of a little money for his own use is if he manages to produce considerably more for someone else. And everything that he does succeed in keeping for himself has this strange habit of slipping through his fingers. You must have noticed that when you were working as an unloader in the supermarket. Hera looked at me with some curiosity. I wanted to kill Enlil Maratovich on the spot. I did notice, I muttered. There is a simple reason why people do not understand the true nature of money, continued Enlil Maratovich. They are only allowed to talk about it within the confines of cargo discourse. Human life has been processed into what to them is an unintelligible substance, but this is never mentioned. What does get endlessly discussed is which particular currency offers the best prospects at any given time. The euro or the yuan, or should one be putting one's trust in the yen? Serious people never think or talk about anything else. That's only natural, I said. A man has to strive to obtain money because otherwise he will die of hunger. That's the way life is. The words are the correct ones, agreed Enlil Maratovich, but I would put them in a slightly different order that would alter the nuance. How would you say it? The way life is, a man will die of hunger if he strives to acquire anything other than money. And what I'm trying to explain at the moment is who set it up like this and why. That may be so, said Hera, but how exactly does a man produce money? A cow has an udder. A man doesn't have anything like that. Enlil Maratovich smiled. Who told you that? I thought Hera was a trifle embarrassed by this. You mean a man does have an udder like a cow? Where is it then? Asked Hera very quietly. I could not stop myself looking at her breasts. My glance did not escape Enlil Maratovich's attention. In the head, he declared, looking at me meaningfully and tapping his skull with his fingers. Where exactly? I asked. That's what I have just been explaining to you, replied Enlil Maratovich. Mind B is the money-producing organ. It functions as a money-generating gland that is found only in mankind, not in any other animal. Hold on a minute, I interrupted. We were talking about how Mind B can explain the difference between two mercs. What's money got to do with that? If you bring it out into the clear light of day, the points of difference between the two Mercedes, seen by Mind B, boil down to money, nothing else. And the cultural landscape that consists of such differences is the mine from which money is produced. This mine, as you have already grasped, has no external reality at all, but is a construct within people's heads. That is why I say that people generate money out of themselves. How can someone who works down a mine be doing so just in his head? Very easily. A continuous process of abstract thinking goes on in Mind B, which is condensed down to a pecuniary concentrate. This concentrate is the difference between the two Mercedes. It bears the same relationship to money as the leaves of the coca plant do to cocaine. Another way of putting it is that money is the purified and refined product of Mind B. Could this monetary distillate be the same thing as glamour? Asked Hera. Good thinking, replied Enlil Maratovich. But there are more inputs into our money distillate than glamour alone. Almost any perception in the city of today is convertible into money. Nevertheless, some kinds of concentrate lend themselves to the output of a larger monetary yield per unit of information than others. In this context, glamour is miles out in front of the competition. That is why modern man is surrounded by so much gloss coating and hype. It's like clover for cows. Does glamour exist all around the globe? I asked. Certainly, it's everywhere, but it's also different everywhere. In New York, it's a Ferrari and clothes from Donna Karan. In a village in Asia, it's a mobile phone with a big screen and a t-shirt with a Mickey Mouse USA famous brand logo. But essentially, they are the same thing. Hera looked at my legs. I noticed that my trouser bottoms had fallen down, that is to say, exposing my socks, whose elasticated tops were embellished with labels in the shape and design of the Union Jack. And what is the role of discourse in all of this? I asked quickly. Pasture has to be enclosed, replied Enlil Maratovich. You must have a fence so that the stock doesn't straggle away. Who is outside the fence? We are. Who else could be? I remembered Jehovah having said the same thing to me, almost word for word. Hera sighed. Enlil Maratovich laughed. Were you expecting more from life then? He said. You shouldn't. What happens to people who refuse to consume the concentrate and produce money? Asked Hera. I am the good shepherd, replied Maratovich, so I won't come down too hard on you. But do just stop and think for a moment. How do you think a cow is going to set about refusing to produce milk? The only way she could do that would be to stop eating. But surely people could, if they wanted to, produce something other than money, as they used to do in the Soviet Union. Enlil Maratovich's eyebrows shot up. A good question. I can put it in a nutshell like this. Animal husbandry can be aimed at producing both meat and dairy products. When it stops being for dairy, it changes to being for meat, and vice versa. Periods of transition are a combination of both. No third possibility has yet been discovered. But what, in this context, is meant by raising stock for meat? It means this, said Enlil Maratovich. You can drink milk, and you can eat meat. There is a resource which people provide while they are alive, and there is a resource which they provide when they die. Happily, those dreadful practices have been condemned and are safely buried in the past, so we do not need to concern ourselves with them. You mean wars? Asked Hera. Not only, replied Enlil Maratovich. Although war does have a role to play, there are different kinds of war. Sometimes vampires from various countries started like children playing a game, except that instead of toy soldiers, they use people. It can also happen that vampires from the same clan play games against one another, with their toy soldiers at home, on their own territory. Of course, we usually try to divide the resources in an equitable manner, but we do not always succeed. Why don't people just get rid of these beef and dairy cattle breeders? Asked Hera. Yes, I echoed her. Tear down the walls, return to their natural environment. Don't forget, you yourselves are now numbered among the breeders. Otherwise, you would not be hanging upside down here. I understand how you feel. I am myself by nature kind and compassionate. But you must get it into your heads once and for all that cows, pigs, and people can never be liberated. Even if it were possible to devise some way of letting this happen for cows and pigs, it could never be done for human beings because, in essence, they are merely extensions of our digestive tract. There is no natural environment for them to live in, only an artificial one, because they themselves are fundamentally artificial. Humans have been bred to live only as they do, but there is no need to shed tears over their fate. In place of liberty, they have freedom, and this is a wonderful thing. We tell them, go and graze wherever you like. The more freedom you have, the more money you will produce. That's not so bad, is it? Enlil Maratovich chuckled contentedly. I don't understand the most important thing of all, I said. The entire flow of money from start to finish is controlled by people. How do vampires collect and use the money? That is a whole different story, replied Enlil Maratovich. You will learn about it later, but now I think we should stop talking for a while. Silence fell. I closed my eyes, enjoying simply being able to hang upside down and not think about anything. Soon I descended into a pleasant state akin to sleep, but not exactly sleep, more a crystal clear state of abstraction. Iggy Pop must have known something of the sort when he sang, "The fish doesn't think because the fish knows everything." Quite possibly, in this state, I too knew everything, but it was too much of a problem to verify, since to do so I would have to start thinking and emerge from my state of bliss. I cannot say how much time elapsed. Presence of mind returned with a loud clap of the hands. I opened my eyes. "Réveil!" announced Enlil Maratovich briskly. Taking hold of the hoop, he nimbly lowered himself to the floor with an agility surprising in someone so corpulent. It was clear the audience was at an end. Hera and I followed suit to join him on the floor. "Still," I said, "what you were saying about how vampires use money, couldn't you just give us a hint?" Enlil Maratovich smiled. Taking a wallet from the pocket of his sport trousers, he extracted a $1 bill, tore it in half, and presented me with one of the halves. "There's your answer," he said. "And now, quick march. It is time to leave here." "Where to?" inquired Hera. "There is a lift here," replied Enlil Maratovich. "It will take you straight up to the garage of my house."